let's dive right into the cities here. And so I'll get out the city chart. Okay. And we'll break down some of the categories. So first of all, it's overall purchasing power, safety, healthcare, cost of living, property price to income ratio, commute time, pollution, and weather. Okay, so these are the categories that are being ranked here. And of course, these are just categories from one study, and it's not necessarily going to be your experience, right?
Right.
And especially when any city, it's not going to be the same experience in every neighborhood within that city too.
That's true.
So that's important to understand. But let's try to understand what the categories are saying first. And so purchasing power is, think, what can your income buy you in terms of local goods and services and goods and services abroad? Okay. There's two things happening there, right? And so what can your income buy you, purchasing power, in terms of local and goods and services abroad? Okay.
All right. Now, are we talking basically your CPI type of stuff, your basket of goods, or are we talking property, assets, that stuff?
I think in terms of like your wages and what can you buy in those wages, both locally and abroad. Okay. So that's one. That's important to understand the and abroad part of this one, because there's a category coming up where it's more straight local. Okay. Then you get the safety. Think crime. What are what's your chances you're getting stabbed on the public transit, right? Like the safety, like it's been a bigger issue in Canada. We can see it as the population increases. It's a harder problem to solve, and we're having more challenges with it.
Yeah, I've stopped taking public transit just for those reasons alone, because it doesn't make you feel safe, and I don't think I would like my children, my daughters, to be taking public transit without me or some way to protect themselves. Right?
Yeah. Healthcare. Okay. Well, I mean, this is healthcare overall. Like Canada's healthcare is, it's not great. I mean, in terms of Canada's healthcare, it's only, it's the 30th best in the world. Like we're not great. There are countries that have lower incomes with better healthcare, right? And people, always just dissolve into this unproductive U.S. versus Canada healthcare debate when neither of them are particularly good at healthcare. So it's just kind of a silly debate, right? And so, you're analyzing healthcare, but the healthcare system in Canada is not, in my experience, the healthcare system is not that different from province to province, and it's not that good overall. So
yeah, I think we talked last week, and it was Singapore that came to the top of the list, if I'm not mistaken.
Singapore, Taiwan, Spain ranks surprisingly high for a country that has, they have lower incomes than Canada and a larger population than Canada, and outranks us, right? It's kind of one of my list of things to do is like, why do they rank so high? I'd like to understand that better. Okay, so that's healthcare, and I see the rankings in there. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure that the difference between 1th and 10th there is that big, but there are some differences, okay? So cost of living, this is more like cost of living. This is just how much do those local goods and services cost? You go to a restaurant, you buy something in a shop. How much is that costing, okay? And of course, overall, Canada's we went to the baseline example of Canada versus the Philippines. Is like, the cost of living in Canada would be higher, but it'd be higher in every first world country because the people staffing those shops and those restaurants, is like they're making more money. So, so that's going to be higher. Property price to income ratio. This one's huge. And like a lot of the other information you'll see on this city, if this is your first time joining us, like I think we're going to have a massively different, a kind of a disproportionate value that I would place on this category, right? Because it's my view, it's like, it doesn't really matter what city that you live in. If you end up broke at the end of the day, you're not going to be happy. In fact, I'd rather be rich in Manila than poor in Toronto.
I would agree with that 100% because I mean, look at the list. I mean, we'll show the list here on the screen, and it looks like, Vancouver is the least property price to income ratio. I mean, the highest property price to income ratio. So people need to make a whole lot more money just to live there.
That's right. Commute time. Okay, commute time, pretty straightforward, how long it's going to take you to get places. And this is one of those things where it might not affect you at all because you could live in the worst commute time city that there is. But if you live right next door to work and all the shops you need are around you, it's like, well, you're not going anywhere. So maybe it doesn't affect you that much or you don't care that much about it. Pollution. I think pretty straightforward. And then weather, right? And weather would be one of those things where it's a little bit subjective. You know, someone's weather that's good might be not so bad for them, and some people might not care that much about it, right? But so let's drill into it. The first one is the purchasing power. And again, this is how much your wages are going to buy you both locally and on a global scale, okay? And the number one place is Edmonton.
That's surprising.
This is just purchasing power, people.
I live here.
Yeah, we live here. It's like there's a reason why our head office is here, right? There is a reason why our head office is here. And you know, this is we're gonna dispel the biases. So I guess the biases. I'm sitting right now right in front of my season ticket package for the Edmonton Oilers, but this is not no one has paid me from Edmonton to do to do this because I can tell you all the bad things about Edmonton too. But in terms of purchasing power, what your wages are versus what you can purchase with those wages, both locally on a global scale, they're pretty darn good, right? And one of the biggest things that really skews that whole thing is we don't pay HST, we don't pay PST, and so just right off the hop, you have goods that are the same headline price. They're just cheaper in Alberta. They're just cheaper in Alberta, right? And you get number 2 Calgary. It's like it's no it's kind of no surprise that that's 1 and 2 for those reasons. Like pretty high, pretty high wages. With the same time, like the goods and services that you're going to be able to purchase both locally and abroad are pretty good with those wages, right? Moving down the list, Halifax.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see Halifax. Wow.
Number 10, the worst place for purchasing power, right? Wages are not that, and you can just look at these studies. Like that's why you just go look at, I don't care what source you look at, go try to find this source or try to find Stats Canada and look at the wages in every province and then consider the fact that you got to pay a massive HST every time you buy something. And you don't have to pay that in another province. And so you start getting down through those lists, and those are important, right? And, we know it's like I spend most of my time in Edmonton. When I'm in Canada, I'm going to spend most of my time in Edmonton. And if I'm not in Edmonton, I'm probably in Vancouver.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's those two places. Other places, we just don't have offices there, and there really isn't a reason to go there.
That's right.
Unless you have a vacation. And
so, Vancouver, purchasing power of 9. It's like if I'm, if I'm buying in something in Vancouver, it's like it's just not going to be the same price. If I'm going to a restaurant, if I'm going to buy, any sort of good, like I'm going to have to pay the PST. It's like it's going to cost me more, right? And you start looking at the wages in these, different cities and different provinces. It's like the variance isn't as big as what one would think, right?
Yeah, and that one thing I found surprising with BC, it seemed like the wages in BC were actually lower than in Alberta in a lot of sectors.
Yeah.
Especially like the trades, right? Electrical, plumbing, and so forth. Like they're paying like 50% or 75% of what the journeyman rate here is in Alberta. And that to me doesn't compute because everything is more expensive in BC, like housing, things at the grocery store. Although their energy is really low because they have a lot of hydro.
Yeah. Safety. Okay. You know what I say? I told everyone we're not biased towards Edmonton. Safety is number 9. So Edmonton's, second from the bottom. Second from the bottom. It's like that is the truth. Like that is the truth. It's like, would I, want my daughters on public transit? No, I would not, right? No. In fact, we're excited because we're going to go, Sandra and I are going to go to Dubai, and we're going to spend New Year's in Dubai this year. And we're going to go out and, watch the light show at the Burj Khalifa and stuff like that. It's like, I would never go to the New Year's Eve celebration downtown Edmonton. It's not a safe environment. Like it is just not a safe environment. Like that's just like people have to understand their surroundings. And so here's one thing: it's like if that's really important to you, that safety. Like Edmonton is not the safest environment, but you can mitigate it too. Your choices, you can mitigate it. There's people who live in very poor places around the world, but they live a very safe life because of the choices they make, the neighborhoods they live in, how they transport themselves around. So it's kind of a trade-off, right? You know, if I'm walking around, in Dubai, I don't have to think about that. I know it's taken care of for me. I don't have to like think about. But if I'm walking around in Edmonton, it's like I have to kind of be aware of that, right? What neighborhood am I in? What time of day is it? Is this something where there's a lot of drunk, intoxicated people just coming out of some sporting event, or it's like this stuff matters, right? And Edmonton's not very good.
And I remember, maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't that way. There were certain areas of Edmonton that were no-go zones simply because you knew there was high crime, high prostitution, drugs, and so forth. You just didn't go there. But the rest of the city was relatively safe and fine. Like you didn't have these issues with gangs and homeless and this kind of stuff out in the outskirts. But now that is completely different.
Yeah, and it's a pretty drastic difference between Edmonton and Calgary. Calgary at number 4. It's like, I kind of understand that, right? And then Winnipeg. Oh man, I'm sorry. It's like Winnipeg's going to be the whipping boy on this list. That just like the least safe place in Canada. And keep in mind, these are the major cities. We're only really looking at the cities with population base of 1 million or more. Right? There's a lot of great small communities, but for the purpose of this, we're looking at the major cities because probably if you're planning on moving, you're probably going to make a move to a major city. If you have a good setup in a small community now, like you're probably staying there. But if you're moving, especially for work opportunities, unless you're moving for a specific job, to move to a city and then hope to move to a smaller population center and hope to find a job is a pretty risky proposition.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then healthcare, and this is the one that's like, okay, it ranks Edmonton number 1. I don't actually think, I've gone to a doctor in Edmonton, I've gone to a doctor in Vancouver. Like, I don't actually think the difference between 1 and 10 here are as big as in some of the other categories. You're looking at the property price to income ratio. It's like the difference between number 1 on the list and number 10 on the list is like light years in difference, right?
Yeah.
Do I think by eye that the healthcare is like people are going to get dramatic service in healthcare? It's like, it's not that good in Edmonton. Like, I mean, it's not, it would not be that unusual for me to go to my family doctor and go there 15 minutes or half an hour before they open to make sure I can get in and don't have to wait forever, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've gone for blood tests here, and I had to line up an hour ahead of time.
Yes.
In order to just get in there in a reasonable amount of time. It's ridiculous right now.
But we have a friend who moved from Edmonton to Montreal, and she's like, I've never gotten a family doctor. She's been there for like 2 years now, and she just hasn't gotten a family doctor, can't get in to see anything. And you hear these other stories in other places in the country. It's like, forget about lining up 15 minutes or 30 minutes before. They're lining up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know what I mean, to try to get in to see the doctor that day. So is it better? I guess so. Is it great? No, don't think that you're going to get magical healthcare. It's still Canadian healthcare, which is not that good on a global basis. And the rules are pretty similar in different jurisdictions. Okay. What tends to attract a lot of physicians to Edmonton, the payout rates from Alberta Healthcare are pretty decent, right? And then what can they buy with those payout rates? It's like, they don't really care about the safety of being number 9 in there because they're not living in those neighborhoods. So,
yeah, I mean, Andrew Tate had a really good explanation of that the other day. Maybe we'll talk about it another time.
The brokies and the super brokies.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah. That was entertaining, but okay. They and so cost of living. Okay, cost of living. This is like just true like local services. Local services. Yeah, like local services are pretty darn affordable in Edmonton. Like compared to if I want local services. I want to go to a restaurant, or if I want a house cleaner in Edmonton versus I want that in Vancouver, you're going to pay a different rate. Like, you're just going to pay a different rate. And I know it. And it's like, some of these, I might be a little more inclined there because, I'm a CPA, and like my goal is to help Canadians build the odds at business and wealth. And, if I see a life of poverty in one jurisdiction versus a life of affluence in another jurisdiction, I'm going to choose the life of affluence. And so what you can actually purchase is pretty important. But then Edmonton being number one, Vancouver being the worst, and those are the two places I spend most of my time. And like, that's correct.